Today I will explore the lives and the works of three extraordinary figures in American literature: Olaudah Equiano, Frederick Douglass, and William and Ellen Craft. All three were born into or lived under systems of slavery, yet they transformed their personal experiences into some of the most influential literary works of their time. While many writers in American history use personal experience as inspiration, these three stand apart because their writing was not simply self-expression. It was a tool of resistance, a form of activism, and a way to insert their humanity in a society that sought to deny it. In this presentation, I will introduce each of these authors and then provide an in-depth discussion of the common threads that connect them, demonstrating how their lives and writings illuminate the fight for freedom and identity in America. Olaudah Equiano was born in 1745 and is what now Nigeria. At around the age of 11, he was kidnapped and sold in the slave trade. He endured the Middle Passage, the brutal sea voyage from Africa to the Americas, before being sold to a series of owners in the Caribbean and the colonial America. Despite the harsh conditions of enslavement, Equiano eventually purchased his freedom. Following his liberation, he became an influential activist in Britain's movement to abolish the slave trade. His autobiography, The Interesting Narrative of the Life of Olaudah Equiano, was published in 1789 and quickly became a bestseller widely across Europe. Equiano's work is remarkable, not only for its vivid depiction of the horrors of slavery, but also its careful construction as a persuasive text. He's used his life as evidence, showing readers the moral, economic, and the human cost of slavery. In essence, this story becomes both testimony and argument, creating a new kind of public voice for a formerly enslaved individual. Frederick Douglass was born in 1818 in Maryland, the son of an enslaved woman and an unknown white man. From early age, Douglass was denied formal education. Because laws at the time prohibited enslaved people from learning to read or write secretly, he taught himself how to read and write, recognizing that literacy was a path to freedom and empowerment. In 1838, Douglass escaped from slavery and settled in the North, where he became a prominent abolitionist, writer, and orator. His autobiography, The Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, was as an American slave, published in 1845, exposed the daily brutality of slavery while demonstrating Douglass' intellect, resilience, and capacity for leadership. Like Equiano, Douglass structured his writing carefully. It was more than a personal memoir, it was evidence against the system of slavery. His life became a tool to challenge both the moral conscience and the political structures of the United States, proving that enslaved people were fully human and capable of intellectual, social, and political achievement. William and Ellen Craft were a married couple from Georgia. Ellen Craft was born into slavery but had a fair complexion, which allowed her to pass as a white. In 1848, the Crafts executed one of the most daring escapes in American history. Ellen disguised herself as a wealthy white man traveling with her servant William. The escape required careful planning, courage, and constant risk, especially after the passage of the Fugitive Slave Act. Their narrative, running 1,000 miles for freedom, recounts both the escape and the ongoing challenges they faced while seeking safety in England. The Craft story is unique because it combines courage and lived experience of interracial dynamics under slavery. Their writing, like Equiano's and Douglass's, serves both as a memoir and as a political intervention, illustrating the possibilities of resistance and the ways enslaved people could assert their agency under oppressive systems. What makes Equiano, Douglass, and the Crafts distinct from the rest of the authors we studied is the combination of lived experiences, direct oppression, and political intent in their writing. Many authors we studied, like Emerson or Hawthorne, wrote from positions of social freedom, education, or privilege. Writers such as Mather or Edwards wrote from institutional authority, often instructing or inspiring others within an existing social hierarchy. Poets like Dickinson or Whitman explored ideas, identity, or philosophy, but not from a position of direct systemic oppression. Equiano, Douglass, and the Crafts, on the other hand, wrote from the margins as people denied freedom, education, and social recognition. Their narratives are not only literary works, but instruments of political intervention. They challenge authority, assert humanity, and redefine what American identity can mean. Although Equino, Douglas, and the Crafts wrote in different times and contexts, they share a deeper, more meaningful commonality. They used their personal narratives as political tools. They simply didn't just record their lives, they crafted their stories to intervene in national and international debates about slavery, freedom, and citizenship. Their writing was structured as testimony, presenting detailed evidence of the cruelty, injustice, and moral contradictions of the institution of slavery. In other words, their lives became arguments. For example, Equino used his narrative to appeal to the moral conscience of British readers, showing the horrors of the Middle Passage and the human cost of the slave trade. Douglas exposed the psychological and physical violence of slavery in the American South, demonstrating that literacy and freedom were intricately linked. The Crafts illustrated both the absurdity of racial restrictions and the creativity required to evade oppression. Together, these narratives show how personal storytelling can challenge systemic injustice. A second layer of their connection is how they redefined the idea of who counts as American. At the time, laws, cultural norms, and the social hierarchies defined whiteness, freedom, and citizenship in extraordinary ways. Equino, Douglas, and the Crafts wrote to assert they were fully human, fully capable of reasoning, and fully entitled to freedom. Their narratives made it impossible for readers to ignore the contradiction between American ideals and American reality. In doing so, they redefined what it meant to be an active participant in society and challenged the moral and political assumptions that underpin slavery. Their work demonstrates that the fight for freedom is not only physical or political, but also literary. By writing their lives into existence, they claim both authority and visibility, transforming themselves from silenced individuals into public intellects and activists. All three authors also illustrate how literacy itself can be a radical act. For Equino, reading and writing allowed him to move from enslaved status to self-emancipated authority. For Douglas, literacy was literally the path to escape, as it provided knowledge, critical thinking skills, and a tool to advocate for abolition. The Crafts relied on literacy, planning, and written documentation as part of their escape and subsequent advocacy. In each case, writing was not neutral. It was a weapon, a shield, and a claim to humanity. Unlike many authors in American literature who had freedom and education as a given, these three had to fight for access to literacy itself, which makes their achievements all more remarkable. These three authors also contributed to the development and evolution of the slave narrative as a literary genre. Equino laid the foundation with a detailed, persuasive narrative that reached international audiences. Douglas perfected the genre, adding more powerful and moral political argumentation that could influence the public policy and opinion. The Crafts innovated by combining suspense, narrative, and social critique through the lens of daring escape. Together, these authors demonstrate that slave narratives were not merely personal memoirs, but also instruments of social, political, and cultural transformation, influencing both their contemporary readers and the generations of Americans after them. What connects Equino, Douglas, and the Crafts is more than a shared experience or genre. It's the way they refuse to allow their lives to be defined by systems of oppression. Each of them turned trauma into testimony, fear into strategy, and injustice into narrative authority. They remind me of each other because all three transformed personal experience into a vehicle of societal change. They show that literature is not only an art or entertainment, but as a means to intervene in the world, challenge injustice, and redefine who belongs and who counts as human. In conclusion, Olaudah Equino, Frederick Douglass, and William and Ellen Craft are united, not just by the fact that they wrote personal narratives, but by the profound purpose behind their writing. They transformed the written word into a tool for liberation, reshaping the moral and political imagination of other readers. Through the lives in their texts, they remind us that literature can be a form of activism, a way to claim power, and a method to redefine society's most enriched ideas about race, freedom, and human dignity. Their narratives endure not only as historical documents, but as inspirations for anyone who seeks to turn into personal experience into meaningful action. This is why, even across different centuries and geographies, these three authors feel deeply connected.